They say you can trace the moment your life changes to a single breath, a single heartbeat. For me, it happened on a sticky Sunday afternoon, over meatloaf and green bean casserole. My name is Linda Carter. I'm 58 years old, retired early from teaching third grade, and if you had asked me a year ago what my proudest accomplishment was, I would have told you without hesitation. Raising my boys, Jason and Tyler. I gave them everything I had, my time, my dreams, my every last penny, believing that if I just loved hard enough, sacrificed long enough, they'd carry that love forward into their own lives, into their families. What a fool I was. That Sunday I went all out. Woke up before sunrise, kneaded the dough for homemade rolls, chopped fresh herbs from the little garden patch I still tended out back. I even polished the silverware, the good set the dining room table with the embroidered tablecloth my mama handed down to me, the one she only used for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Everything had to be perfect, because that's what we do, don't we? Mothers, we set the stage. We pour ourselves into moments we pray they'll remember, not realizing that sometimes they're already forgetting. By 3 o'clock, the house smelled like heaven, but something gnawed at me. A tiny, sharp-toothed worry I couldn't name. Then I heard the tires crunch on the gravel driveway. I wiped my hands on my apron and rushed to the door, heart thudding like a girl's on prom night. Jason stepped out first, taller now. Hair slicked back the way his father used to wear it when he wanted to look important. Tyler followed, grinning that wide, careless grin he'd had since he lost his first baby tooth. I opened the screen door, already smiling, but my smile froze when I saw her. Caroline, their stepmother. She stepped out of the car like she was gliding, perfect blonde bob, sunglasses perched on her head, wearing a linen dress that looked too white, too expensive for a backyard Sunday dinner. I hesitated only a second, then pasted my best hostess smile back on. Caroline, I said, keeping my voice even. What a surprise. She air-kissed my cheek, her perfume, something sharp and floral, almost choking me. Oh, I couldn't miss a chance to spend time with my favorite boys, she purred. My boys. The word stung, but I swallowed them down like bitter medicine. At the table, things went downhill fast. They barely touched the food. Jason scrolled on his phone, showing Caroline pictures of his new boat, a gleaming thing he'd bought with his bonus from the tech firm. Tyler laughed at Caroline's jokes about how hopeless she was in the kitchen. I sat there, carving tiny meaningless shapes into my meatloaf with my fork, trying not to feel like a ghost at my own table. After dessert, which no one but me seemed to notice, Jason cleared his throat. The air in the room shifted, tightened. We wanted to talk to you about something, he said, exchanging a look with Tyler. We. I thought. Not I. We. Caroline, it seemed, was part of the we now. Jason pulled a manila envelope from his messenger bag and slid it across the table. Caroline leaned back in her chair, one manicured hand resting lightly on Jason's arm. I picked up the envelope with shaking fingers. Inside, documents. Legal ones. Power of attorney. Financial trustee. Transfer of property. It hit me all at once what they were asking. No, not asking. Expecting. They wanted me to sign away everything. My home. My bank accounts. My decisions. It's just for your peace of mind, Jason said, as if it was a favor. To make things easier, Tyler added, smiling like I was a toddler being offered a cookie before a shot. Caroline said nothing. She just watched me, her lips curved into a faint, satisfied smile. I set the papers down slowly, pressing my palms against the table to steady myself. The room spun slightly. The framed family photos on the wall blurred, shifted. The boys' first day of school, their Little League trophies, Jason at his college graduation. All the memories I had worked so hard to create now weaponized against me. For a long moment, no one spoke. The clock ticked loudly in the silence, each second hammering nails into the coffin of the life I thought I still had. Mom, Jason said, his voice softening like he was speaking to someone halfway to the grave. You're not getting any younger. That's when I saw it. The pity, the condescension. They had already buried me. I just hadn't laid down yet. I picked up my coffee cup, hand painted by Tyler in the third grade, still chipped at the rim, and took a slow, deliberate sip. "I'll think about it," I said, forcing a smile so brittle it could have shattered on the floor between us. Jason and Tyler relaxed visibly, mistaking my exhaustion for agreement. Caroline squeezed Jason's hand lightly, like a general congratulating a soldier after a well-won skirmish. They stayed a little while longer, talking about nothing, filling the air with meaningless noise. I nodded where I was supposed to, laughed once or twice when politeness demanded it. When they finally left, Caroline waved from the passenger seat, smiling like a queen departing a conquered village. I stood at the window, watching until their car disappeared around the curve of the road. Then, and only then, I let the tears fall. I sat at the kitchen table long after the sun dipped below the horizon. The casserole went cold. The pie stiffened on the counter. I thought about every sacrifice. Every night I stayed up sewing costumes for school plays. Every sick day I took to nurse them through fevers. Every scrap of myself I gave so they could grow strong and free. And here they were, strong and free, and willing to hand me over to a woman who didn't even know how Jason liked his coffee, or how Tyler had cried when his pet hamster died. I opened the envelope again, smoothed the papers out under my palms. I still had my signature. I still had power. And maybe, just maybe, for the first time in decades, I was going to use it. I didn't sleep much that night. I just lay there in my bed, the ceiling fan ticking above me like a metronome set to heartbreak. The envelope with those papers sat on my nightstand, pulsing in the corner of my vision like it had a heartbeat of its own. At some point, just before dawn, I got up and made a decision. I padded barefoot to the kitchen, made myself a strong cup of coffee, 2 sugars, no cream, just the way I liked it before life got too bitter to sweeten. I sat down at the table, pulled out the black leather binder from the cabinet above the fridge. That binder had been with me since Jason was born. I used to call it my "Oh honey" folder, as in, "Oh honey, you thought I didn't plan for this?" Inside were neatly tabbed dividers, savings, life insurance, deeds, retirement. I flipped to the one labeled investments. I had saved for years, quietly, religiously. Every birthday check I didn't cash. Every refund I never spent. I sewed custom drapes for half the town when Jason and Tyler were in high school and stuck every penny of that money into CDs and bonds. When their father left, ran off to find himself with a yoga instructor named Rain. I got nothing but a pile of legal fees and 2 broken-hearted boys. But I clawed my way out. I built us a life. That life was worth just over $1 million now. Not that they ever asked. I stared at that number, 7 digits that no one, not even my sons, knew existed. Not because I was hiding it, because I was waiting. I had planned to leave it to them. All of it. A clean legacy. No strings. Just my way of saying, I never stopped loving you. But now I felt something unraveling inside me. A thread pulled so tight for so long finally gave way. I made a few calls. By 9 a.m., I had an appointment with my attorney, Sandra Delgado, a woman who wore red lipstick like armor and spoke in sentences that could slice marble. "You want to amend your trust?" she asked, arching one perfect eyebrow. "I want to replace the beneficiaries," I said, folding my hands neatly in my lap. "Entirely." She didn't ask why. She didn't need to. When I was done, she leaned back in her chair, nodded once, and said, "Bold move, Linda." "You sure?" I thought of Caroline's smirk, of Jason's rehearsed concern, of Tyler's casual disregard. I've never been surer of anything in my life. By noon, the papers were signed. I named 3 beneficiaries. The women's shelter I volunteered at every December. My old friend Nora, who had stuck with me through 2 divorces, breast cancer, and a home flood. Me. The last portion I moved into a private living trust, accessible only by me, for my care and comfort. I included a clause. If either Jason or Tyler tried to contest the trust, they'd get nothing. Not even the letters I planned to leave behind. It was cruel, maybe. But then again, betrayal has a way of turning love into clarity. That evening, I drove out to the coast. I needed the sea, the salt, something older than pain. I walked along the sand with my shoes in one hand, the wind pushing back against me like it was daring me to move forward. I felt strangely light. Not angry, Not even sad. Just free. I rented a small beach house, paid in full for a year. The realtor was surprised. She said most retirees went inland where it was cheaper. I smiled. I'm not most retirees. I spent that night watching the moon etch silver lines across the ocean. I didn't call the boys. I didn't need to. They'd be calling me soon enough. And when they did, I'd answer. But not the way they expected. It didn't take long. 3 days after I made the changes, just 3, I got a call from Jason. The number popped up on my phone while I was watching gulls squabble over crusts of bread outside my new beach house. I let it ring. I let it go to voicemail. I wanted to hear his voice when he didn't know I was listening. "Hey, Mom," he said, with a brightness too bright, the kind he used to fake in high school when he was lying. "Just wanted to check in. We were hoping to talk more about those documents we left with you. No pressure, of course. Just give me a call when you can." He didn't mention Caroline. Not by name. But I could hear her in the background, soft, murmuring, then laughing at something I wasn't supposed to hear. I didn't call back. Tyler texted me the next morning. "You okay? Haven't heard from you. We're getting worried." Worried. That word again. It used to mean something. But now, it was just the opening act to manipulation. I waited another 2 days. Let them stew. Let them wonder. Then I sent a group text. "I'm safe. I've made some decisions about my future. I'll be in touch when I'm ready." "Mom." Jason called within seconds. This time I answered. "Mom, what decisions? What do you mean?" I could hear the edge in his voice, the panic wrapped in politeness. He thought he was being subtle. I said, stirring cream into my coffee. "I'm taking care of myself. Like you said, you wanted me to have peace of mind, right?" There was a pause. I could almost hear his jaw tightening. "You didn't sign the papers, did you?" "No, Jason. I didn't." Longer pause. "I see," he said, and his voice dropped lower, the way it did when he was a boy and realized he couldn't win an argument. "Can we meet? Talk this through." "Talk," I echoed. "Like we did last Sunday?" That was different. "No," I said calmly. It was revealing. He sighed. "Look, Mom, you're blowing this out of proportion. Caroline and I were just trying to take control of everything I own." He went silent. It wasn't the silence of guilt. It was the silence of someone who just lost access to something they assumed they had already pocketed. "You should know," I added gently. "I've updated my estate plan." "What does that mean?" "It means the money I saved for the last 30 years is no longer part of your future." "Mom," he said, suddenly loud, "you can't be serious. That money was mine. All of it. You were going to leave it to us." "I was," I said, "until I realized I didn't owe you a thing." Then I hung up. I was shaking when I set the phone down. Not because I was afraid, but because I had never, not once, stood my ground with my boys like that. Not when they were teenagers slamming doors. Not when they forgot birthdays. Not when they stopped calling on holidays. That afternoon, Tyler drove to my house. Or rather, my old house. He texted from the driveway. "Why is there a for sale sign on the lawn?" I didn't respond. I had listed the house with Nora's daughter, who ran a boutique agency that specialized in fresh starts. The sign went up that morning. The sale was pending before the sun had even set. That night, Tyler called me. Left a voicemail I didn't expect. "You really did it," he said, his voice low, stunned. "You're really cutting us out." There was no apology. No explanation. Just disbelief, like he couldn't fathom a world in which his mother chose herself. The next morning, Caroline called me. I didn't know she even had my number. "Linda," she said, her voice low and syrupy. "I think there's been some confusion." "No, Caroline," I said. "There's finally clarity." I ended the call before she could reply. That afternoon, I made lasagna, poured a glass of wine, lit a candle just for myself. And as I took the first bite, I realized something remarkable. For the first time in my life, I wasn't cooking for anyone else. Not my boys, not their father, not their wives, just me. And it tasted like freedom. It was only a matter of time before the desperation kicked in. By the following week, they'd both tried calling again. Jason left 3 voicemails in one day, each one sounding more rattled than the last. Tyler, for his part, Send a long text thread that swung between guilt-tripping and begging. You don't have to do this. We were just trying to help. Think about the family. Caroline's upset, too, you know. This is hard on all of us. That last one made me laugh. A dry, hollow sound I barely recognized. Hard on her? I was the one who got erased. I let a full week pass. I didn't answer a single message. I spent my mornings walking the beach, my afternoons painting on the back porch, nothing fancy, just watercolors and memory. The nights were quiet, peaceful, a kind of silence I hadn't felt in years. No arguing, no passive-aggressive sighs, no watching people I raised pretend I was a footnote. Then came the letter, hand-delivered by courier to the beach house, typed on legal stationery. A formal request for reconciliation and clarification regarding financial affairs from Jason and Tyler, drafted by some downtown attorney whose name I didn't recognize, but whose tone was cold as marble. It wasn't a lawsuit, not yet, but it was a warning shot. They wanted to meet. In good faith. They even had the gall to suggest we do it at Caroline's house. I sat there on my little porch, wind tugging at the corners of the letter, and I sipped my tea slowly. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called a family meeting, but not the way they expected. I chose the place, La Mer Cafe, a quiet little spot with chipped teacups and lace curtains, where the owners didn't blink if you stayed for 2 hours with just a scone and a story. I'd been coming there every Thursday. I reserved the back table and asked them all to come. Jason, Tyler, Caroline. They arrived 20 minutes late. Of course they did. Caroline walked in first, her purse swinging like it had attitude. Jason looked tired, pale, probably hadn't slept. Tyler looked furious, jaw clenched like a man trying not to shout. I greeted them with a smile and a pot of chamomile tea already steeping. Mom, Jason started, why are we here? I poured myself a cup. To talk, I said, now that you're ready to listen. They all sat down. None of them touched the menu. You blindsided us, Caroline said. No hello, no smile. Just straight to the drama. Did I? I tilted my head. Funny. That's exactly how I felt last Sunday at dinner. Jason ran a hand through his hair. We didn't mean for it to come off that way. You wanted me to hand over everything I've worked for, I said, voice calm. My house, my bank accounts, my autonomy. And you did it with your new wife at the table like it was a real estate transaction. No, Tyler snapped. We did it because we were worried. You're alone. What if something happens? Something did happen, I said. My son stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as an asset. Silence. Even Caroline didn't have a comeback for that. I leaned in. Let me be very clear. I'm not angry. You're not. Jason blinked. No, I said. I'm awake. They didn't know what to do with that. I let the silence stretch, then pulled a small envelope from my bag and placed it in the center of the table. Jason reached for it. I stopped him. Before you open that, I said, understand this. I am not punishing you. I am protecting what little of myself I still have left. He nodded slowly. Inside the envelope were 2 letters, one for each of them, handwritten, folded neatly, along with photocopies of the new estate documents, a breakdown of who gets what, how, and most importantly, why. Jason read his letter in stunned silence. Tyler looked like someone had just poured cold water down his back. Caroline peeked over his shoulder. Her face went blank. Mom, Jason started, voice hoarse. This isn't fair. You're right, I said, rising from my chair. It's not. I didn't wait for them to finish. I walked out into the sunlight, the air thick with ocean salt and liberation. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The old Linda, the one who waited to be included, waited to be loved, waited for recognition, she would have stayed. She would have begged. But she was gone. And the woman who replaced her? She had a beach house, a will of iron, and nothing left to prove. I thought it might end there. A sharp cut, a clean break, the kind you wince at once and move on from. But family wounds don't work that way. They fester. They whisper behind closed doors. And sometimes they echo back in voices you didn't expect. The fallout from that cafe meeting came faster than I imagined. That evening, Nora called me. Her voice was low, cautious. I just had a visit, she said. From your Caroline. I nearly dropped my teacup. She came to my shop, Nora continued. Asked a lot of questions. About your finances. About what you're planning. Said she was concerned. Concerned. I repeated, the word curling in my mouth like sour milk. She hinted, carefully, that you might be unwell. Forgetful. There it was. Not just betrayal. A character assassination. They were trying to paint me as unstable. Confused. Maybe even senile. I felt a strange heat rise in my chest. Not shame. Not fear. Rage. Quiet and focused, like coals smoldering beneath ash. Nora, I said, I need a favor. She didn't hesitate. Anything. Find me a lawyer who's seen this kind of thing before. By morning, I had a consultation booked with a woman named Regina Sue. Sharp, seasoned, and, as Nora put it, someone who's made grown men cry in courtrooms. I brought every document, every note, even a copy of the voicemail Jason left months earlier where he told me to take my time. The estate stuff can wait till you're gone. Regina looked it all over and leaned back in her chair. You're not crazy, she said. You're dangerous. I smiled. I like to think I'm finally awake. She drafted a cease and desist that afternoon. Sent it directly to Jason and Tyler, warning them against making any statements, verbal or written, about my mental health, financial state, or private affairs. It was worded elegantly, but the message was clear. Back off. And then something unexpected happened. Tyler's wife called me. Well, ex-wife. Her name's Rachel. Sweet girl. Always had a kindness in her eyes that made me wonder how she ended up with Tyler in the first place. We hadn't spoken in years, not since the divorce. But there she was, calling me out of the blue. I heard what's happening, she said gently. And I just wanted to say, I see you. I blinked, unsure what to say. They're making you out to be the problem, she continued. But you're not. You never were. And just like that, a crack formed in the wall of silence I'd been pounding on for years. We talked for hours that night. She told me things I hadn't known. About Tyler. About Caroline. About money changing hands. Business deals done in my name without my consent years ago, before they even brought me those documents. She sent me screenshots, emails, paper trails. It wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. And now I had proof. I sat on my porch for a long time after that call. The waves rolled in steady and strong like applause. Somewhere inside me, something shifted again, not just resolve, but clarity. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about identity, about reclaiming the woman I had tucked away for decades in favor of motherhood, patience, and politeness. I wasn't just Linda Carter, mother of Jason and Tyler. I was Linda Carter, survivor of a slow erasure. And I wasn't going quietly. The gloves were off. After that call with Rachel and the folder of damning documents she sent over, I didn't sleep. I stayed up reading every line, cross-referencing dates with memories. I remembered signing a few things years ago. Things Jason said were just routine. Consent forms, joint titles, business filings I barely glanced at, because back then I still believed my boys had my best interests at heart. Now I knew better. They'd used my name, my assets, my signature. But the worst part? They'd done it with the smug confidence of people who thought I'd never fight back. So I fought. With Regina's help, I filed a formal civil complaint. It wasn't just about misrepresentation. It was about fraudulent use of power, financial coercion, elder exploitation. Big words, heavy charges. But I wasn't scared. I was furious. The legal notice was served on a Friday morning. Jason and Tyler were at Caroline's charity gala. I heard from Nora that the server delivered the envelope right between the canopy course and the silent auction. Word spread like wildfire. I didn't say a word publicly, not yet. But Regina? She knew how to fan flames. She released a quiet, carefully worded statement to the local press. Nothing salacious, just factual. A retired educator alleging financial misconduct by her adult children, with assistance from her daughter-in-law. The matter is now in the hands of legal counsel, it ended. That weekend, I went into town to get groceries. Just eggs, bread, tea. And people stared, but not with judgment, with something closer to awe. At the post office, Miss Delgado behind the counter whispered, "Good for you." At the diner, sweet old Marvin from church slid me a slice of pie on the house. Even the teenager bagging my groceries gave me a nod that said respect. It was strange. It was healing. But it was also terrifying for them. The next week, Caroline called. Again. This time, she left a voicemail, her voice sharper than a blade dulled by too many lies. "This has gone too far, Linda. You're embarrassing everyone. Jason's job is on the line. Tyler's reputation." I deleted the message, because this wasn't about them anymore. This was about me. And I wasn't done yet. I took a photo the next day. Just a simple picture of me in my rocking chair, facing the sea. Hair loose, smile quiet but firm. In my lap, the old, "Oh honey" binder. I posted it on Facebook, my first post in years. Sometimes you spend your whole life building something, only to realize you were the foundation everyone else stood on. So I moved. I kept the blueprint, and I rebuilt for me. The post exploded. Old students, friends I hadn't heard from in decades, women I'd volunteered with, prayed with, stitched quilts with, they all chimed in. Some shared their own stories. Some just said, "We see you." I wasn't invisible anymore. I was loud. I was documented. I was witnessed. And I knew deep down the war wasn't over. Jason and Tyler would push back. They'd try to spin it, cry foul, call it misunderstanding. But it was too late for that. I had receipts. I had Rachel. I had a legal team. And most of all, I had myself, finally, fully, fiercely. I didn't expect Tyler to show up on my porch. It was a Tuesday morning, sky pale and windless, the kind that makes the ocean look more like glass than water. I was trimming dead leaves off my succulents when I heard the tires crunching up the gravel drive. I looked up, and there he was. He stood by his car for a while, hands in his pockets, looking like a little boy lost in grown-up clothes. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just wiped my hands on a towel and waited. He finally approached. "Mom," he said. "Tyler." His eyes darted behind me, like he half expected someone to jump out and mediate. "Can I come in?" I considered it for a long beat. Then I stepped aside. He looked around the house like it was some exhibit. Took in the paintings on the wall, the stack of library books by the couch, the pot of tea warming on the stove. This wasn't the house he remembered. It was too calm, too mine. We sat at the kitchen table. I poured tea, but didn't offer him any. He tapped his fingers against the tabletop. "I wanted to see you. Before this gets worse." I arched an eyebrow. "Worse for who?" He flinched just a little. "I didn't know," he said finally. "About the accounts. About what Jason and Caroline were doing. Not all of it." I didn't say anything. "I didn't mean to," he paused, ran a hand down his face. "I wasn't trying to hurt you. You were trying to benefit," I said flatly. "And you didn't care what that cost me." He didn't argue. Instead, he pulled something from his pocket. A photograph. Worn, edges curling. It was the one I kept on my dresser for years. Him and Jason, ages 5 and 7, sitting in the old backyard wading pool. Sunburned noses. Ice pops in hand. Grinning like the world was still small and kind. "I found this at the old house," he said. "Before you listed it. I meant to give it back." He slid it across the table. I didn't touch it. "Why are you really here?" I asked. He looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw my son. Not the polished man in designer loafers who laughed at Caroline's jokes. The boy I'd tucked in after thunderstorms. "I was wrong," he said simply. "I let other people shape how I saw you. I stood by when I should have stood up." A silence fell between us. Not tense, not sharp, just heavy. "I can't undo what's been done," he said. "But I want to try. If you'll let me." I stared at him. Then, slowly, I picked up the photo. "I'm not angry you wanted more from me," I said. "I'm angry you never saw what I gave." His eyes shone just a little. "I see it now," he said. "And I see you." I nodded. "I'm not dropping the suit," I added. He nodded too. "You shouldn't." He stayed for another hour. We didn't talk about the lawsuit again. We just sat, sipping tea, talking about old neighbors and his kids' school play and the neighbor's dog that kept getting into my yard. When he left, I didn't hug him. But I didn't close the door too quickly, either. And for the first time in months, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, but maybe the beginning of repair. If Tyler's visit cracked the ice, Jason's move the following week sent a tidal wave through it. It came in a thick envelope, hand-delivered by a man in a suit who looked like he hadn't smiled in a decade. No greeting, no explanation, just a formal summons. Jason was contesting the trust. I sat on the porch with the letter in my lap, my teacup forgotten beside me. He was going to court. After everything, after the cafe, the cease and desist, the public fallout, he was still coming for what he thought was his. The paper was cold in my hands. I reread it twice, slow and careful. It accused me of undue influence, mental instability, and erratic behavior inconsistent with long-term maternal planning. The words read like daggers disguised as concern. Jason hadn't signed the documents himself. Of course not. He had lawyers do the dirty work. But I knew his fingerprints were all over them. I called Regina. She didn't miss a beat. Let him try, she said, cool as ever. This isn't your first fight, but it's going to be his. The hearing was set for 3 weeks out. I spent those days gathering everything, old journals, text messages, the original binder with every financial step I had ever taken. I even found birthday cards Jason had sent me that, ironically, thanked me for being the most responsible woman I know. I made copies, labeled everything. My hand shook sometimes, but not from fear, from determination. Then came a surprise, a letter. Not from Jason, from his wife, Caroline. The envelope was cream-colored, the handwriting careful and sharp. I almost didn't open it, but I did. It was short. Linda, you've made your point. I hope it was worth what it cost. Caroline, no apology, no regret, just venom in a pearl necklace. I folded it neatly and slid it into the file labeled character reference. The night before the hearing, I didn't sleep. I didn't cry either. I sat at the kitchen table with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders and watched the sea glisten under the moonlight. I thought about the first time I held Jason. How tiny he was. How his whole hand barely wrapped around my thumb. I never imagined it would come to this. But I wasn't the same woman anymore. The courtroom was small, clean, too bright. Tyler sat behind me, quiet and pale, his hands clasped between his knees. Caroline didn't come. Jason arrived in a pressed suit, jaw tight, not once looking my way. The judge was a woman. Older, silver hair, sharp glasses. I liked her instantly. Jason's lawyer started first, droning on about inconsistencies, red flags in my behavior, my recent disappearance from public obligations. He even cited my move to the beach house as a sign of instability. When it was my turn, Regina stood like a storm in heels. She laid out everything. The years of financial independence, the intentional saving, the photographic proof, the medical evaluations showing I was of sound mind. She pulled out the photos, the birthday cards, even the social media post with hundreds of comments supporting me. She ended with 5 simple words, "This is not a victim." I didn't speak until the judge asked if I had anything to add. I stood slowly. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady, "I am not trying to punish my son. I'm trying to protect myself from being erased." The judge looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "I've seen enough." Jason didn't even stay for the ruling. He walked out before the judge could declare that the trust would stand untouched and unchallenged, that the court recognized the right of a mother to decide what legacy meant to her, that I was legally and entirely in control of my future. I didn't watch him go. I just reached for Tyler's hand. A week after the ruling, I went back to the neighborhood where I raised my boys. I hadn't driven those streets in months. The sidewalk still bore the cracks I used to warn them not to trip over. Mrs. Lacey's hydrangeas still burst through her fence like gossip that couldn't be contained. And the old maple tree out front of our house, my house, was still holding strong, though one of its limbs sagged lower than I remembered. The new owners had already moved in. A young couple, 2 kids, a tricycle on the front porch. I parked down the street, sat in the car, and watched for a while. It wasn't sadness that washed over me. It was closure. That home had been my battlefield and my sanctuary, and now it was someone else's dream. Good. I didn't need the house to remember the life I built there. But what I did need, I realized, was something else. A legacy that went beyond protecting myself. I'd spent so much energy defending my past. I hadn't dared to imagine what came next. That changed when I visited the shelter I'd named in the trust. It was a small building tucked behind an old church, run by a woman named Elsie with a spine of steel and eyes like warm honey. I walked in and told her who I was. She blinked, then rushed around the desk and hugged me like I was already family. "We got the first installment," she whispered. "It covered our heating bill and therapy services for the next 6 months. You have no idea." "I do," I said. "That's why I chose you." We talked for hours about what the shelter needed, about the women who walked in at midnight with nothing but the clothes on their backs, about second chances. When I left, I felt lighter, like I was stepping into something instead of away from everything. The next day, I made another decision. I took a portion of the trust, the part that would have gone to Jason and Tyler, and established a scholarship in my name for single mothers returning to school. I wrote the mission statement myself. This scholarship is for the ones who stayed, the ones who sewed buttons in the dark and read bedtime stories with empty stomachs, the ones who gave it all without asking for anything back. May they now receive what they were too proud to beg for. I sent the announcement to a few friends. Nora posted it online. It went viral. Messages poured in from across the country. Stories from women I didn't know but who felt like sisters. Teachers, nurses, grandmothers, strangers who'd been erased like I had until they weren't. And in that swirl of love and recognition, I got one more message. From Jason. Just a line. "I saw the news. I get it now. I'm sorry. No excuse. No spin. Just 7 words that came too late and still meant something." I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because for the first time in my life, I didn't need his approval to feel whole. There's a kind of peace that comes after the storm, not the triumphant kind, not the parade with confetti and cheers. No, the kind I found was quieter than that. It came in the way the ocean moved on still mornings, or how my tea steeped without me watching, perfectly patient. A year had passed since I first told my boys no. 12 months since I refused to be erased. I still lived at the beach house. My hair was longer now. Grayer too, but I wore it down without apology. I'd taken up painting again, not because I was good at it, but because I liked the way colors blended when you let them. Some days, I walked the shoreline at sunrise. Other days, I sat with Elsie at the shelter, helping organize interviews, writing resumes, or just holding a hand when someone needed to cry without saying why. Once, I watched a woman read a letter from her son with trembling fingers and forgiveness in her throat. I didn't tell her my story. I just listened. That was enough. The scholarship had funded its first 3 recipients. One was a 32-year-old waitress with 2 kids who wanted to become a nurse. Another was a widowed grandmother returning to finish her social work degree. And the third was a woman my age who just wanted to prove to herself that it wasn't too late to learn. Each time I read their essays, I cried, not from grief, but from recognition. They weren't just applicants. They were echoes of the woman I had been. Jason never called again, but I heard through the grapevine he and Caroline had separated. Something about differences in vision. I'll never know if what happened between us cracked their perfect little castle. I don't need to know. Tyler came to visit once in spring. He brought tulips, yellow ones. We sat on the porch in silence for a while. Then he said, "I told the kids everything. About what we did. What you did." I nodded. "Do they hate me?" he asked. "No," I said. "Because you told them the truth." He looked out at the ocean. "You still painting?" "Every day. I'd like to see one." So I showed him. Just a small canvas. It was a messy swirl of greens and blues and gold. Nothing anyone would hang in a gallery. But he stared at it a long time. "It feels strong," he said. And I smiled. "It is." Before he left, he hugged me. Not the kind you give out of obligation. The kind you give when you're trying to rebuild a bridge, one board at a time. Now, and then, I still think about how close I came to losing everything. But then I remember I didn't lose a thing. I claimed myself. And that $1,000,000, it didn't vanish. It transformed into homes, into chances, into quiet revolutions. into reminders that women like me don't just fade away when we're no longer useful. We rise, we build, we become the storm. And when the silence finally comes, it isn't lonely. It's earned. It's ours.